A secret ring, a mysterious letter, and one impossible choice. Jungkook's hidden promise to Jimin changes both of their destinies forever. I told you never to open that letter if you still wanted him to live. The voice echoed through the abandoned chapel just as Jungkook's trembling fingers froze above a small ivory envelope resting beside a velvet ring box. Outside, thunder rolled across the midnight sky and rain hammered against the stained glass windows with relentless force, turning every flash of lightning into a ghostly dance of fractured colors across the cold marble floor. Jungkook's heartbeat pounded louder than the storm itself. In his right hand rested a simple silver ring engraved with tiny lavender flowers on the inside, flowers that only Jimin would recognize because they had once grown beside the lake where the two of them had made an innocent promise years ago. Tonight had been planned for months. Every candle, every flower, every quiet melody waiting to fill the chapel had been carefully prepared for the moment Jungkook would finally confess everything he had buried inside his heart. Yet none of those plans mattered anymore. His eyes remained locked on the unfamiliar envelope. There was no sender's name. Only 5 handwritten words covered the front in dark blue ink. Open this before proposing today. A cold sensation crawled down his spine. Almost instinctively, he looked over his shoulder. The chapel was empty. The old wooden pews stretched into darkness, while flickering candles struggled against the draft creeping beneath the ancient doors. He could almost hear someone breathing somewhere beyond the shadows, but every time he turned, there was nothing except silence. Jungkook had never believed in omens or supernatural warnings. He trusted logic, preparation, and loyalty above everything else. That discipline had helped him survive countless hardships, but tonight logic was beginning to crack beneath something he could neither explain nor ignore. He slowly lifted the envelope. It felt unusually heavy, as though more than paper rested inside. His fingers hesitated before breaking the wax seal stamped with an unfamiliar symbol resembling 2 intertwined branches. The scent of old cedar drifted from the paper as he unfolded the neatly written letter. The handwriting was elegant but strangely familiar, stirring memories he could not immediately place. If you are reading this, then destiny has reached the moment I feared most. Before you place that ring on Jimin's hand, you deserve to know the truth hidden for 12 years. Someone close to both of you has spent every day protecting a secret that can destroy the future you are trying to build. This is not about love, it is about survival. Jungkook frowned, his breathing slowed as he continued reading. You believe tonight begins your happiest chapter. In reality, it may become the first page of a tragedy. Jimin has never lied because he wanted to hurt you. He lied because someone forced him to choose between your happiness and your life. The paper trembled in Jungkook's grasp. Impossible. Jimin never hid important things from him. They had promised complete honesty after years of misunderstandings. Every scar they carried had been healed through trust. At least that was what Jungkook believed. Another flash of lightning illuminated the chapel. This time he noticed something else lying inside the envelope. A faded photograph slipped onto the floor. He bent down to pick it up, only to feel the air leave his lungs. The photograph showed Jimin standing beside an older man neither of them had spoken about in years. Behind them stood a little boy whose face had been deliberately scratched away. Across the back of the photograph, someone had written another sentence. One of these 3 people was never supposed to survive. Jungkook's pulse accelerated uncontrollably. The older man in the picture was unmistakable. It was Professor Han, the retired historian who had once mentored both of them before vanishing without explanation nearly a decade earlier. Everyone had believed he had moved overseas. No one had questioned it. Yet the date printed on the photograph proved something impossible. It had been taken only 3 weeks ago. Professor Han was alive. More disturbing was Jimin's expression. He was smiling in the photograph, but his eyes looked hollow, carrying a sadness so profound that Jungkook had never seen it before. It was the face of someone protecting unbearable pain behind practiced warmth. Jungkook whispered Jimin's name into the empty chapel, hoping somehow the silence would answer him. Instead, another folded page slipped from the envelope. This one contained only a list of dates and locations. Every location matched places where Jungkook and Jimin had shared unforgettable memories together. The lakeside, the abandoned observatory, the quiet bookstore where they first met, the mountain trail where they had watched the sunrise. Beside every location was a single word written in red ink. Watched. A chill spread through his entire body. Someone had followed them for years. every cherished memory suddenly felt contaminated by invisible eyes hidden somewhere beyond sight. Jungkook looked toward the chapel entrance. The heavy wooden doors creaked open by themselves as another gust of icy wind swept inside, extinguishing half the candles in a single breath. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the altar remained illuminated by trembling candlelight. There, resting on the polished wood, sat a single white lily that had not been there moments before. Beneath it lay a small black key attached to a tag bearing one final handwritten message. If you truly love him, do not let him wear the ring until you know what this key unlocks. Jungkook stood frozen, the silver ring in one hand and the mysterious key in the other. The proposal he had dreamed about for years no longer felt like the beginning of a beautiful future. It had become the center of a mystery stretching back over a decade, one that quietly waited beneath every happy memory he and Jimin had ever shared. Somewhere beyond the chapel walls, hidden beneath the roar of the storm, destiny had already begun rewriting the story they thought belonged only to love. The storm had weakened into a cold drizzle by the time Jungkook stepped out of the abandoned chapel, yet the silence that surrounded him felt even heavier than the thunder that had shaken the stained glass walls only minutes before. The silver ring remained hidden inside his coat pocket, its weight now strangely unbearable, while the mysterious black key rested tightly in his palm. Every instinct urged him to find Jimin immediately, to ask 100 desperate questions, to place the letter in front of him and demand the truth. But another voice inside him whispered caution. If someone had truly watched them for years, confronting Jimin too soon might place both of them in danger. His phone vibrated. One message appeared on the screen. "Where are you? I've been waiting for you." It was from Jimin. Jungkook closed his eyes. For months he had imagined receiving that message on this exact night. He had pictured himself smiling, walking into the candlelit chapel, kneeling before Jimin, and watching tears of happiness fill his eyes as he accepted the ring. Instead, his fingers hovered above the keyboard without typing a single word. Another message arrived only seconds later. "Don't worry if you're running late. I'll wait as long as it takes." Jungkook's chest tightened painfully. That simple sentence reminded him of Jimin's peculiar habit of waiting without complaint. Whether it was outside a cafe during winter mornings or beneath an old oak tree after long workdays, Jimin had always believed that the people he loved were worth waiting for. He never rushed anyone. He never demanded explanations. It was one of the countless reasons Jungkook had fallen in love with him. But tonight waiting had become cruel. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and stared at the black key. The tiny metal tag attached to it bore a faded address. Ashwood Railway Station. Locker 117. The station had been abandoned nearly 15 years earlier after a devastating fire destroyed most of the terminal. No trains had stopped there since. Why would anyone leave something there? Jungkook entered his car, but instead of driving toward the restaurant where Jimin was patiently waiting, he turned onto an empty highway leading away from the city. Rain blurred the windshield as memories drifted into his mind. 12 years earlier, he and Jimin had been inseparable teenagers who spent every weekend exploring forgotten places around the countryside. Among their favorite adventures was the abandoned railway station. They had once discovered an old locker there that refused to open. Jimin had jokingly declared it contained pirate treasure. Jungkook had laughed until his stomach hurt. Neither of them had ever managed to unlock it. His grip tightened around the mysterious key. Locker 117. The very same locker. His heart skipped. Could that impossible coincidence really be connected? 40 minutes later, the rusted station emerged from the darkness like the skeleton of another era. Broken windows reflected pale moonlight while vines crawled across cracked brick walls. The air smelled of wet iron, mold, and forgotten years. The silence felt unnatural. Even insects seemed unwilling to disturb the place. Jungkook switched on his flashlight and stepped inside. His footsteps echoed through the enormous hall where shattered clocks remained frozen at 9:17, the exact moment the fire had supposedly consumed the station years ago. Rows of rusted lockers lined one wall. He counted carefully. 113, 114, 115, 116. Then, locker 117. Unlike every other locker, it looked untouched by rust. Someone had maintained it. His heartbeat accelerated. He inserted the black key. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, click! The lock released effortlessly. Inside sat an old leather journal wrapped in dark blue cloth. Beneath it rested a tiny music box shaped like a crescent moon. Jungkook recognized it instantly. He had given that music box to Jimin on his 17th birthday. "I thought you lost this." His voice barely escaped as a whisper. Someone had hidden it here. He slowly opened the journal. The first page contained only one sentence. "If Jungkook finds this before the proposal, there is still hope." He turned another page. Every entry had been written by the same elegant handwriting from the mysterious letter. The journal described events that made no sense. Names, dates, meetings, surveillance reports. Someone had documented Jungkook's entire life. His university graduation, his first apartment, his first job, the cafe where he met Jimin again after years apart. Even the necklace he always wore was mentioned. None of these records contained mistakes. Whoever wrote them had been frighteningly close. Then one page stopped him cold. It contained a photograph attached with yellowed tape. Jungkook stared in disbelief. It showed himself sleeping on a hospital bed after the accident that had nearly taken his life 8 years earlier. He had always believed he survived because emergency responders arrived quickly. But another figure appeared in the corner of the photograph. Jimin. He looked exhausted. His clothes were stained with blood. His hands were covered in fresh bandages. Across the bottom someone had written, "He never told you whose blood saved your life." Jungkook's breathing became uneven. He remembered waking in that hospital with only fragments of memory. Doctors had called his recovery miraculous. Jimin had simply smiled and said everything would be okay. He had never mentioned blood, never mentioned sacrifice, never mentioned pain. Jungkook turned another page. His eyes widened. Medical documents, donation records, consent forms. Every signature belonged to Jimin. Every date matched moments when Jungkook had mysteriously recovered from serious injuries over the years. The realization struck him with crushing force. Jimin had quietly endured suffering after suffering without ever asking for gratitude. He had hidden every scar beneath long sleeves and warm smiles. Every sacrifice had remained invisible. A tear slipped down Jungkook's cheek. "Why?" His whisper disappeared into the empty station. The final page held another sealed envelope. Across the front someone had written, "This letter was written by Jimin. Open only when you're ready to understand why he could never accept your proposal without telling you everything first." Jungkook held the envelope against his trembling chest. For the first time that night, fear was no longer his strongest emotion. It was heartbreak, not because he believed Jimin had betrayed him, but because he was beginning to understand that the person he loved had been carrying an unbearable burden completely alone, smiling through every shared memory while silently protecting a truth that threatened to change everything they believed about their past. Jungkook stood motionless in the forgotten railway station, the sealed envelope trembling between his fingers. The rain had finally stopped, leaving only the slow rhythm of water dripping through the cracked ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, an old metal sign swayed gently with the wind, producing a hollow creak that echoed through the deserted hall. It sounded almost like someone breathing. He lowered himself onto a dusty wooden bench. The envelope felt older than the journal, its edges softened by time as though it had been opened and sealed again countless times. Across the front, beneath Jimin's name, there was one final sentence written in smaller handwriting. "If you are reading this, then I have already failed to protect you." Jungkook's throat tightened. His thumb slowly broke the faded wax seal. Inside rested 3 folded pages and a tiny dried lavender flower. The flower immediately carried him back to a distant summer afternoon beside the lake where he and Jimin had spent hours weaving lavender into clumsy bracelets. Jimin had laughed every time the flowers slipped apart, insisting they didn't need perfect knots because real promises stay together without them. Jungkook closed his eyes for a brief second before unfolding the letter. "Dear Jungkook, if this letter ever reaches you, then destiny has chosen honesty over silence. I hope you are angry. Anger is easier to carry than grief. You probably believe I lied to you. You're right. I did. But never because I stopped loving you. Every lie I told was another wall between you and a truth that should never have reached you. There is someone who has spent 12 years trying to erase every trace of what happened to us. You think we met by coincidence at university. We didn't. You think our childhood memories disappeared because we simply grew apart. They didn't. You think the accident 8 years ago changed everything. It didn't. Everything had already changed long before that day." Jungkook lowered the page. His pulse thundered inside his ears. Childhood. He and Jimin had always believed they first became friends as teenagers. Had they known each other before? He hurried to the second page. "Do you remember your recurring dream? The little bridge covered with red leaves. The paper windmill. The little boy crying because he lost his wooden bird. You always laughed whenever you told me about that dream. You said it felt more real than your own memories. It wasn't a dream. It happened. We were children. We promised each other that no matter what happened, neither of us would ever face darkness alone. But someone heard that promise. Someone who believed our families should never have met. That night changed everything. Afterward, your memories disappeared. Mine didn't. I remembered every second." Jungkook's breathing stopped. The bridge. The windmill. The wooden bird. Those images had haunted his sleep for years. Doctors had dismissed them as meaningless fragments created by the subconscious. Yet Jimin knew every detail. Every impossible detail. Jungkook pressed a shaking hand against his forehead. Without warning, flashes burst through his mind. A child's laughter. Tiny hands covered in paint. A paper kite flying above a river. Someone calling his name. Not Jungkook. Cookie. Only one person had ever called him that. A little boy with bright eyes. A boy whose face remained blurred by time. Pain exploded behind his eyes. He nearly dropped the letter. As the dizziness settled, another memory surfaced. Someone had been running. Someone was shouting. A loud crash. Fire. Smoke. Then, a pair of small hands pulling him away. His vision blurred with tears. No, he whispered. It can't be. His eyes returned to the final page. Professor Han wasn't only our teacher. He was the man who protected us after that night. The scratched face in the photograph wasn't damaged by accident. Someone wanted you to forget him forever. His name was Minyu. He was our best friend. He disappeared the same night your memories did. Professor Han spent years searching for him. So did I. We never stopped. Until 3 weeks ago. We found him. He remembered everything. And that's why someone is hunting us again. If you have reached this page before giving me the ring, don't come looking for me immediately. There is one place you must visit first. Everything begins where the stars touch the water. The old observatory. Bring the ring. Do not bring the letter. Trust no one. Not even someone who already knows your name. Whatever happens, please don't regret loving me. It was the happiest part of my life. Always yours, Jimin. Silence consumed the station. Jungkook stared at the signature until the ink blurred beneath tears. He no longer tried to stop. The entire foundation of his life had begun collapsing. His happiest memories. His first meeting with Jimin. The hospital accident. Even his own childhood. Nothing was what it seemed. He carefully folded the letter and slipped it into his coat. As he reached for the journal, something fell from between its final pages. A small cassette tape. Across its faded label, someone had handwritten only one sentence. Play this only at the observatory. Jungkook frowned. Who still used cassette tapes? He turned it over. On the back was a date. July 31. Today's date. His heart pounded. Someone had expected him to arrive here tonight. Someone had planned every step long before he received the mysterious letter. He hurried outside. The clouds had begun to separate, revealing a sky filled with countless stars. For the first time since the nightmare began, the storm was gone. Yet the calm felt unnatural. As he unlocked his car, his phone vibrated again. It was another message from Jimin. Only 3 words. I'm sorry. Jungkook stared at the screen for a long moment. He typed a reply. Where are you? The message failed to send. No signal. The phone suddenly rebooted by itself. When the screen lit up again, Jimin's conversation had completely disappeared, as though it had never existed. Every photograph, every message, every shared memory stored inside the phone. Gone. Only one new notification remained on the black screen. Memory can be erased, promises cannot. The notification vanished before Jungkook could touch it, leaving nothing but his own reflection on the dark screen. His pulse pounded in his ears as he searched frantically through his phone again. Jimin's name was nowhere to be found. Every photograph they had taken together during the past decade had disappeared. Their messages, voice recordings, favorite playlists, and even the calendar reminder for tonight's proposal had been erased as if they had never existed. Only one image remained in the gallery. It had no date, no location, and no sender. Jungkook opened it with trembling fingers. It showed the old observatory standing beneath a sky overflowing with stars. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary night photograph, but after a few seconds, he noticed a shadow standing inside the highest window. The figure was impossible to identify, yet one detail immediately caught his attention. The person was holding a lantern, exactly like the lantern that Professor Han used to carry during their astronomy lessons years ago. Jungkook slipped the phone into his pocket and started the engine. The observatory was nearly 2 hours away, hidden on the highest hill overlooking Silver Lake. As the city lights disappeared behind him, darkness swallowed the narrow mountain road. Pine trees stretched endlessly along both sides, their branches whispering in the cold wind like distant voices exchanging secrets. The farther he drove, the stronger an unfamiliar feeling grew inside him. Not fear, recognition. Every turn in the road felt strangely familiar. Without thinking, he slowed beside a weathered wooden bridge crossing a narrow stream. His breath caught. The bridge. Red maple trees surrounded it. Even in the darkness, their crimson leaves shimmered beneath the moonlight. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "I've been here." The words escaped before he realized he had spoken them. Another memory surfaced. Two children laughing. A tiny paper windmill spinning wildly in the autumn breeze. Someone shouting joyfully, "Run faster, Cookie." The voice belonged to Jimin. Not the adult Jimin he knew now. A child. Clear. Warm. Alive inside memories Jungkook had believed never existed. His head throbbed painfully. For a moment, he could almost see them. Two boys running across the bridge. One carrying a wooden bird. The other waving a paper windmill above his head. Then, a loud horn. Blinding headlights. A violent impact. Everything dissolved into fire. Jungkook gasped and gripped the dashboard until his knuckles turned white. No. His breathing became ragged. It wasn't a dream. He remained motionless until the pain slowly faded. When he finally looked toward the stream below, something reflected the moonlight. A small object rested among the rocks. Curiosity pulled him from the car. The cold night air filled his lungs as he climbed carefully down the muddy slope. There, half buried beneath moss and fallen leaves, lay an old wooden bird. Its paint had faded. One wing was broken. Yet Jungkook recognized it instantly. The toy from his recurring dreams. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. Carved into the underside were three tiny initials. J. M. Jungkook. Jimin. Main youth. A wave of emotion crashed over him so suddenly that tears blurred his vision. The three of them had carved their initials together. Not separately. Together. They really had known each other long before either of them remembered. A faint sound interrupted his thoughts. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Crunching across wet leaves behind him. Jungkook turned sharply. No one. Only darkness between the trees. The forest had become unnaturally silent. Even the wind had stopped. Another step. Closer this time. He instinctively reached into his pocket, wrapping his fingers around the silver ring. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. Only another footstep. Then another. Circling him. His heartbeat accelerated. He scanned the forest with his flashlight. The beam swept across tree trunks, tangled branches, drifting mist. Until it stopped. Someone stood 30 meters away. A tall figure wearing a long black coat. Its face remained hidden beneath the shadow of a wide hood. The stranger neither moved nor spoke. They simply watched. Jungkook took one cautious step forward. The figure raised one gloved hand. Not in greeting. In warning. Then they slowly pointed toward the bridge. Jungkook looked back instinctively. The bridge was empty. When he turned again, the figure had vanished. Only deep footprints remained in the damp earth before disappearing into the woods. His pulse raced. He hurried back to the road. As he reached his car, he noticed something tucked beneath the windshield wiper. Another envelope, dry, untouched by the night's moisture. His name was written across the front. Inside was a single folded sheet. No greeting, no signature, only one sentence. You recovered one memory tonight. The next one will hurt far more. Beneath the sentence lay an old keychain shaped like a tiny telescope. Jungkook stared at it in disbelief. Professor Han had given matching telescope keychains to 3 children after their first visit to the observatory. He had completely forgotten. Or perhaps he had been forced to forget. The realization sent another chill through his body. Someone wasn't merely watching him. Someone knew exactly when each forgotten memory would return. He climbed back into the car and drove toward the observatory without looking back. The mountain road grew steeper until the trees suddenly opened onto a vast clearing. There it stood, the observatory. Its white dome glowed beneath countless stars, exactly like the mysterious photograph. The enormous telescope still pointed toward the heavens, as though patiently waiting for someone who had never stopped searching. Jungkook stepped out of the car. The air smelled of pine, cold stone, and blooming lavender carried by the night breeze. His eyes widened. Fresh lavender. Someone had planted hundreds of flowers around the observatory. Jimin's favorite. He walked slowly toward the entrance. The heavy wooden door was already open. Soft golden light flickered inside. On the floor rested dozens of candles arranged in a winding path leading toward the central telescope. At the very end of the path stood a grand piano. Its polished surface reflected the stars shining through the glass dome above. Resting on the piano keys was a single cassette player. Waiting, exactly where the mysterious tape was meant to be played. Jungkook took the cassette from his pocket. With trembling hands, he inserted it into the player. A gentle click echoed through the silent observatory. For several seconds, there was only static. Then, a child's laughter filled the room. Not one child, 3. And among them, a familiar voice whispered with innocent certainty. Promise me, no matter how much we forget, we'll always find each other again. The observatory fell completely still as the innocent voices echoed beneath the enormous glass dome. Jungkook stood frozen beside the cassette player, afraid that even the sound of his own breathing might erase what he was hearing. The laughter was bright, carefree, untouched by the weight of secrets or loss. It belonged to children who believed the world could never separate them. A second voice answered. I promise. It was unmistakably Jimin. His voice was softer than Jungkook remembered, carrying the fearless sincerity only a child could possess. Then came another cheerful laugh. If one of us forgets, the others have to remind him. A third child. Minkook, the name that had existed only in fragments until now. The recording crackled gently before another sound emerged. Footsteps across wooden floorboards. Someone adjusting the cassette recorder. Then Professor Han's warm voice filled the observatory. You 3 keep making promises under these stars. Someday life will test every one of them. One of the boys giggled. We'll never break them. Professor Han chuckled quietly. I hope you're right. Silence followed for several seconds. Then the atmosphere inside the recording changed. A loud knock echoed somewhere in the background. The laughter stopped instantly. Someone opened a door. A man's unfamiliar voice spoke with unsettling calm. Professor Han, we found them. The cassette hissed. Professor Han answered immediately. They're only children. They remember too much. Jungkook felt every muscle in his body stiffen. The stranger continued. You were warned 12 years ago. Those memories should have disappeared. Professor Han's voice became colder than Jungkook had ever imagined possible. I won't hand them over. Another long silence. Then, a violent crash. Children screaming. Glass shattering. The recording distorted beneath frantic movement. Someone shouted, "Run!" It was Professor Han. Jimin, take Jungkook, don't let him look back. Heavy footsteps thundered through the speakers. A child was crying. I can't find Minyu. Another explosion erupted somewhere nearby. Wood splintered. The tape suddenly stopped. Click. Silence returned. Jungkook stared at the cassette player. His heartbeat roared inside his ears. The recording had ended in the middle of chaos. He rewound it. Nothing else. Only static. His hands trembled uncontrollably. The accident. The missing memories. Professor Han. Minyu. It had all begun here. He slowly looked around the observatory. For the first time, he noticed something unusual. The telescope wasn't aimed at the stars. It pointed toward the lake below. Curious, Jungkook climbed the narrow iron staircase leading to the observation platform. The ancient telescope remained perfectly aligned with a single spot near the water's edge. He leaned forward and looked through the eyepiece. His breath caught. Far below, on the opposite side of Silver Lake, stood a tiny wooden cabin hidden among towering pine trees. Warm light glowed through its windows. Someone was inside. Then, movement. A familiar figure stepped onto the porch. Jimin. Even from this distance, Jungkook recognized the gentle way he stood with one hand tucked inside his coat pocket. His heart leaped. Jimin. He reached instinctively for his phone. Still no signal. He looked through the telescope again. Jimin wasn't alone. Another person emerged from the cabin. An elderly man with silver hair. Professor Han. Alive. Relief washed through Jungkook. But it lasted only seconds. A black vehicle suddenly appeared from the forest behind the cabin. Its headlights remained off. The doors opened silently. 4 figures dressed in dark clothing stepped outside. Professor Han noticed them first. He shouted something Jungkook couldn't hear. Jimin turned sharply. The first flash lit up the darkness. Not lightning. Gunfire. The telescope shook as Jungkook instinctively stepped back. No. He rushed downstairs. His keys slipped from trembling fingers before he managed to unlock the car. The engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed behind him as he raced down the mountain road toward the lake. Every second felt endless. His mind replayed the cassette recording. Take Jungkook. Don't let him look back. The words suddenly carried an entirely different meaning. Jimin hadn't simply protected him once. He had been protecting him his entire life. The narrow road twisted dangerously through the forest. Branches scraped violently against the sides of the car. Jungkook ignored every warning sign. He only needed to reach the cabin. Another burst of distant light flashed beyond the trees. Then another. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Hold on, he whispered desperately. I'm coming. 5 minutes later, he reached the lakeshore. The cabin stood only a few hundred meters away. Smoke drifted above the trees. Jungkook jumped from the car and sprinted through the forest. His lungs burned. Twigs snapped beneath his feet. The smell reached him before the clearing did. Smoke, burned wood, gunpowder. His heart pounded harder than ever. He burst through the final line of trees and stopped. The cabin was empty. Its front door hung open. The light still glowed warmly inside. A tea kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Two untouched cups rested on a wooden table. One chair had fallen sideways. The struggle had happened only moments ago. Jimin. His voice echoed through the silent cabin. No answer. He searched every room. Nothing. Then he noticed fresh drops of blood leading toward the back door. His chest tightened painfully. He followed them outside. The trail disappeared beside the lake. Only one thing remained. A familiar silver necklace lay on the wet grass. Jimin never took it off. Jungkook picked it up with shaking hands. Folded beneath the chain was a small handwritten note, protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. Only 6 words appeared on the paper. You were never the intended target. Jungkook read the sentence again. And again. The meaning settled over him with horrifying clarity. Everything that had happened. The erased memories. The mysterious letters. The years of surveillance. The attack tonight. None of it had been about stopping Jimin. It had always been about someone else. Someone whose forgotten past was finally beginning to return. Someone standing alone beneath the stars, clutching a ring he had never been able to give. Himself. The silver necklace felt ice cold in Jungkook's trembling hands. Moonlight shimmered across the tiny pendant as though it were trying to reveal something hidden beneath its polished surface. He stared at the 6 words on the note again. You were never the intended target. For several long seconds, nothing moved. The lake was perfectly still. The wind had disappeared. Even the smoke rising from the abandoned cabin seemed frozen beneath the stars. Jungkook slowly closed his fingers around the necklace. His heartbeat echoed through the empty shoreline. If it wasn't Jimin, he whispered. Then who wanted me? A quiet voice answered behind him. You already know. Jungkook spun around. Professor Han stood only a few meters away. His silver hair was stained with ash, and a fresh wound crossed his forehead, yet his eyes remained calm despite everything that had happened. His dark coat was torn across one shoulder, and he leaned heavily on an old walking stick carved with tiny constellations. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jungkook rushed toward him. Where's Jimin? Professor Han lowered his eyes. They took him. The words struck harder than any weapon. Jungkook grabbed the older man's shoulders. Who are they? Professor Han remained silent. Tell me. His voice cracked. I've spent my entire life chasing answers. I don't want another mystery. The old professor sighed deeply. You are asking the wrong question. Jungkook frowned. Professor Han looked directly into his eyes. You should be asking why they never killed you. Silence settled between them. Jungkook slowly released his grip. Professor Han walked toward the lake, gazing across the moonlit water. When you were children, people believed the 3 of you had witnessed something impossible. What? The Midnight Archive. Jungkook stared blankly. Professor Han continued quietly. Most people think it's only a legend. But legends usually begin with truth. He bent down and picked up a smooth stone before tossing it gently into the lake. Ripples spread across the water. They believed the archive contained records capable of changing governments, destroying powerful families, exposing crimes buried for generations. Jungkook shook his head. That makes no sense. It didn't make sense to me either. Professor Han smiled sadly. Until I saw it. Jungkook's breathing stopped. You've seen it? Yes. Where is it? Professor Han looked toward the mountain towering behind the observatory. Hidden beneath it. The words seemed impossible. Jungkook glanced instinctively toward the observatory standing high above them. Beneath that mountain. Professor Han nodded. The observatory was never built to study stars. It was built to hide something beneath them. A cold chill spread through Jungkook's body. Everything he believed about the observatory shifted in an instant. Professor Han reached into his coat and carefully removed an old leather notebook. Its cover bore the same intertwined branch symbol that had appeared on the mysterious letter. I've protected this for 12 years. He handed it to Jungkook. Inside were dozens of sketches, maps, architectural drawings, underground tunnels, secret chambers. Every page described an enormous structure hidden beneath the mountain. At the center of every drawing appeared the same circular room. Its door required 3 keys. Professor Han quietly pointed at the illustration. You already possess one. Jungkook instinctively reached into his pocket. The black key. Professor Han nodded. Jimin carries the second. And the third. The professor closed his eyes. Minkook. The name echoed across the silent lakeshore. But Minkook disappeared. Professor Han slowly opened his eyes again. That's what everyone was supposed to believe. Jungkook felt his pulse quicken. He's alive. Professor Han gave a faint nod. He has been alive all this time. Then where is he? The old man hesitated. Before answering, he has been living closer than either of you ever imagined. Jungkook's thoughts raced wildly. Every stranger, every familiar face, every coincidence. Could Minkook have been watching them all along? Professor Han suddenly began coughing violently. Dark red blood stained his hand. Jungkook stepped forward in alarm. You're hurt. It isn't new. The professor smiled weakly. I've been dying for some time. No, there isn't enough time to argue. He pressed the notebook firmly into Jungkook's hands. You must listen carefully. His voice became quieter. The people hunting you belong to an organization older than any government. They call themselves the Keepers. They believe memories are more dangerous than weapons. Jungkook remained silent. Professor Han continued. They erase truths. They rewrite histories. They decide which stories survive. And 12 years ago, his breathing grew uneven. They failed to erase yours. Jungkook's chest tightened. So they erased my memories instead. Professor Han nodded. And Jimin refused to let them erase your heart. A painful smile appeared on the old man's face. He stayed beside you. He became your friend again. He let you fall in love with him naturally. He never forced your memories to return. He wanted your feelings to be real. Tears filled Jungkook's eyes. Every smile, every shared sunrise, every quiet conversation. Jimin had chosen patience over desperation. He had waited years for Jungkook to love him again without knowing why. Professor Han suddenly looked toward the forest. His expression changed instantly. They're here. Jungkook heard it too. Engines, several of them, approaching rapidly through the trees. Bright headlights pierced the darkness one after another. Professor Han gently pushed Jungkook backward. "You have to leave." "I'm not leaving without Jimin. You'll never reach him if you're captured tonight." The old man reached into his pocket one final time. He placed a tiny brass compass into Jungkook's palm. Unlike ordinary compasses, its needle didn't point north. It pointed toward the mountain. Beneath the observatory is an entrance. It will only open for someone carrying the first key. Jungkook looked up. "What about you?" Professor Han smiled peacefully. "My part of the story ended years ago." The headlights grew brighter. Voices echoed through the forest. They were close. Very close. Professor Han slowly stepped away from Jungkook. "You once asked me why stars never seem afraid of darkness." Jungkook remembered. He had asked that question as a child. The professor had never answered. Until now. "They don't fear darkness." He smiled gently. "Because they were born inside it." The old man turned toward the approaching vehicles without another word. Jungkook remained frozen. For the first time since this nightmare began, he understood that every answer he sought had been patiently waiting beneath the observatory. He closed his hand around the black key, the brass compass, and the silver ring. Then, with one final look toward Professor Han standing alone beneath the stars, Jungkook ran back toward the mountain, carrying not only the promise he had hoped to make to Jimin, but also the truth that had been hidden beneath their shared destiny since childhood. The mountain seemed impossibly quiet as Jungkook climbed the narrow trail back toward the observatory. Behind him, distant voices echoed through the forest, followed by the muffled rumble of engines and the occasional beam of headlights sweeping across the trees below. Yet the higher he climbed, the more the outside world disappeared until only the sound of his own breathing remained. The brass compass rested tightly in his hand. Its needle never wavered. Instead of pointing north, it continued to pull toward the center of the mountain, as though responding to something alive beneath the earth. Jungkook finally reached the observatory just before dawn. The glass dome reflected the fading stars, while the first traces of pale blue spread across the eastern horizon. Everything looked exactly as he had left it. The candles had burned out. The grand piano stood silently beneath the telescope. The cassette player remained on the wooden bench. Nothing suggested that the building concealed one of history's greatest secrets. He removed the notebook Professor Han had given him. Several pages contained hand-drawn maps of the observatory. One sketch showed the telescope mounted upon a circular platform. Beneath it, written in faded ink, appeared a short instruction. The stars revealed the door only at first light. Jungkook looked toward the enormous telescope. The first rays of sunrise entered through the eastern windows. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the telescope began moving by itself. Ancient gears hidden beneath the floor awakened with a deep metallic groan. The enormous instrument rotated until it aligned perfectly with the rising sun. Then a low vibration spread through the observatory. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The circular stone floor beneath the telescope trembled. A narrow beam of sunlight passed through the telescope's lens, striking the center of the marble floor. Something clicked. Hairline cracks appeared in a perfect circle. The stone platform slowly descended into darkness. A hidden staircase emerged beneath it. Cold air rose from below, carrying the scent of old parchment, damp stone, and cedar. Jungkook stared silently. The entrance had been waiting beneath his feet all along. He switched on his flashlight and carefully descended. Each step echoed endlessly through the darkness. The deeper he walked, the older the air became. The staircase finally opened into a vast underground corridor supported by towering stone columns. Every wall was covered with intricate carvings. Stars, constellations, trees with intertwined roots, children holding lanterns. Some of the artwork looked thousands of years old. Others appeared surprisingly recent, as though different generations had continued adding to the walls across centuries. His flashlight paused on a familiar symbol. Two intertwined branches, the same emblem from every mysterious letter. Below it were words carved into the stone. Memory is the first home of truth. Jungkook quietly repeated the sentence. Something about it felt deeply familiar. As he continued forward, dozens of shelves emerged from the darkness. They stretched farther than his flashlight could reach. Every shelf held sealed wooden boxes. Each box bore a handwritten name. Some names belonged to ordinary people. Others belonged to kings, scientists, artists, judges, soldiers. Thousands, perhaps millions, each carefully preserved. Jungkook approached one of the nearest boxes. The name carved into its lid froze him where he stood. Professor Han. His pulse quickened. He opened it carefully. Inside lay journals, photographs, letters, audio recordings, everything documenting an entire lifetime. It wasn't merely an archive. It was someone's memories. Every important moment preserved forever. Jungkook slowly closed the box. His breathing became uneven. How many lives had been collected here? Who decided what deserved to be remembered? His eyes wandered across more shelves. Then he stopped. Near the end of one aisle stood another wooden box. Smaller, newer. His flashlight revealed the name engraved upon it. Park Jimin. Jungkook's heart skipped. He hurried toward it. The lid was already slightly open. Inside rested dozens of objects arranged with extraordinary care. A faded movie ticket, a lavender bracelet, a broken wristwatch, a cafe receipt, a tiny folded paper crane. Jungkook recognized every one of them. They were pieces of their life together. His fingers trembled as he lifted the paper crane. Hidden inside was a handwritten note. First day you smiled after forgetting me. A tear rolled silently down his cheek. He reached for the next object. The cafe receipt. Another note. The first coffee you bought me without remembering we'd already shared 12 years earlier. Another. The broken wristwatch. You apologized for being late. You didn't know I'd already waited 12 years. Jungkook covered his mouth. Every object carried a memory. Not because Jimin feared forgetting. Because he feared Jungkook never remembering. His vision blurred completely. The realization shattered something inside him. Jimin had quietly rebuilt their entire relationship from the beginning without asking for recognition. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every accidental touch. He had treasured them all because, to him, they had happened twice. A faint sound echoed somewhere deeper within the archive. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Jungkook immediately wiped his tears and switched off his flashlight. Silence returned. The footsteps continued. Closer. Someone was walking confidently through the endless corridors. Not searching. They already knew the way. Jungkook carefully hid behind one of the towering shelves. The footsteps stopped only a few meters away. Then a calm voice spoke into the darkness. I wondered how long it would take before you found this place. Jungkook remained silent. The stranger continued. You've changed since you were a child. Another pause. But your habit of hiding behind books hasn't. Jungkook's breathing stopped. Only one person, besides Jimin, had ever teased him about that childhood habit. His hands tightened instinctively. The stranger stepped into the faint light filtering from the staircase above. He appeared to be about Jungkook's age. His dark hair was slightly longer than remembered. A faint scar crossed his left eyebrow. Around his neck hung the second half of the tiny telescope keychain Professor Han had once given 3 boys. His eyes were filled with both warmth and unbearable sadness. When he smiled, it felt strangely familiar. My name won't mean much to you. He took one slow step forward. But once, his voice softened. You called me your brother. Jungkook stared at him in complete disbelief. The man's smile trembled. I mean you. And for the first time in 12 years, the third child from the forgotten promise finally stood before him. Jungkook could not move. The underground archive seemed to disappear around him as his eyes remained fixed on the man standing only a few steps away. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant drip of water echoing through the ancient corridors. Minyu did not approach again. He simply waited, just as though he understood that 12 years of missing memories could not be repaired in a single heartbeat. Jungkook's voice finally emerged as a whisper. You're alive. Minyu smiled faintly. I've been alive every day. The words carried no bitterness, only exhaustion. Jungkook searched his face. The scar above his eyebrow. The telescope keychain. The strangely familiar smile. Fragments of forgotten afternoons flashed through his mind. 3 boys lying on the observatory roof, counting shooting stars, arguing over whose paper airplane flew the farthest, laughing until sunrise. Another sharp pain spread through his temples. He stumbled backward. Minyu instinctively reached out. Jungkook flinched. The movement stopped Minyu's hand in midair. I know. Minyu lowered it slowly. You don't remember enough yet. How do I know you aren't lying? You don't. The answer came immediately. And if I were in your place? A tired smile crossed his face. I wouldn't trust me either. Jungkook remained silent. His fingers tightened around the silver ring hidden inside his coat. You said. He struggled to continue. I called you my brother. Minyu nodded. We weren't brothers by blood. We chose to become brothers. The sentence echoed strangely inside Jungkook's chest. Minyu looked toward the shelves surrounding them. We spent almost every weekend here. You, me, Jimin, and Professor Han. You loved getting lost among these archives. You believed every box contained a sleeping story. Jungkook's eyes wandered across the endless rows of preserved memories. Without warning, another image burst into his mind. A little boy himself running through these very corridors, holding a lantern, laughing. Last one to the library loses. 2 other children chasing after him. One of them was Jimin. The other, Minyu. The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared. Jungkook pressed a hand against the cold stone shelf. It's coming back. Minyu's expression softened. It will, but not all at once. It never does. A distant metallic sound echoed somewhere deeper beneath the mountain. Minyu immediately turned toward the darkness. His face changed. They're inside. Jungkook frowned. The keepers. Minyu nodded. They've found the entrance. They shouldn't have been able to. They weren't. Minyu looked directly at him. Someone opened it for them. A heavy silence followed. There are others here. Minyu answered quietly. There always have been. He walked quickly toward another corridor. Come with me. Jungkook hesitated only a second before following. The passage narrowed until it opened into an enormous circular chamber, unlike anything he had imagined. The ceiling rose nearly 30 meters overhead, carved into the shape of a night sky filled with glowing crystal stars. At the center stood an immense stone table. Upon it rested 3 empty keyholes, exactly as Professor Han's notebook had illustrated. 1, 2, 3. The archive chamber. Minyu's voice echoed softly. It only opens when all 3 keys are united. Jungkook looked around. So Jimin has the 2nd key. And the 3rd. Minyu reached beneath his shirt. A thin chain emerged, carrying an old bronze key. Its shape matched the drawing perfectly. I've protected it since that night. Jungkook stared. If we have 2, then we only need Jimin. Minyu's smile disappeared. That's exactly why they took him. The realization struck Jungkook instantly. They want his key. Yes. And if they force him, they won't. Minyu interrupted gently. You don't know him the way I do. Jungkook almost laughed. I love him. I know. Minyu's eyes reflected quiet admiration. He loves you even more. He'd rather die than surrender that key. Those words filled Jungkook with both pride and terror. He knew Minyu was right. Jimin would never betray the promise they had protected for years. Not even to save himself. Minyu walked toward the stone table. His fingertips brushed one of the empty keyholes. When we were children, he smiled sadly. We believed this room contained treasure. What does it actually contain? Minyu remained silent for several moments. Then he answered. The original memories. Jungkook frowned. What do you mean? The keepers erase memories. This chamber restores them. The words seemed impossible. Minyu continued. Every memory ever stolen. Every truth ever buried. Every identity ever rewritten. They're all preserved here. Jungkook slowly understood. This isn't an archive of documents. No, it's an archive of people. The enormity of the revelation stole his breath. How many lives had been altered? How many families separated? How many histories rewritten? Before he could speak again, a loud explosion shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ancient stone cracked somewhere above them. Minyu looked toward the entrance. They're closer. Another explosion. This one much nearer. The lights carved into the crystal ceiling flickered. The entire mountain trembled. Jungkook instinctively reached for the silver ring. His thumb brushed its smooth surface. I promised I'd give this to him tonight. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Minyu glanced at the ring. A gentle smile appeared. You know, he said quietly. Jimin bought his ring 3 years ago. Jungkook looked up sharply. What? He never expected you to propose first. Minyu chuckled softly despite the danger surrounding them. He carried that ring everywhere. He kept saying, if Jungkook ever remembers everything, I'll ask him before he can ask me. Jungkook felt tears welling again. He already had a ring. Minyu nodded. White gold. Inside. He smiled. He engraved the words you used to tell him when you were children. Jungkook's voice trembled. What words? Minyu stepped closer. His expression became almost nostalgic. You always said, no matter how dark the night becomes. Jungkook suddenly finished the sentence without thinking. I'll find you by the stars. The words escaped naturally, as though they had never been forgotten. Both men froze. A powerful silence filled the chamber. Minyu's eyes shimmered. You remembered. Jungkook blinked. He hadn't realized. The sentence had simply returned. Not from thought, from his heart. For the first time, the missing years no longer felt completely empty. A promise made beneath childhood stars had finally found its way home. The words lingered in the chamber long after Jungkook had spoken them. No matter how dark the night becomes, I'll find you by the stars. Neither Jungkook nor Minyu moved. It was as if the mountain itself had recognized the promise. A faint vibration traveled through the ancient floor. The crystal stars embedded in the ceiling glowed a little brighter, bathing the circular chamber in a pale silver light. Minyu looked around in astonishment. It reacted. Jungkook frowned. What reacted? The archive. Minyu's voice was barely audible. It recognizes original memories. Before Jungkook could ask another question, the enormous stone table at the center of the room emitted a low, resonant hum. Ancient symbols slowly illuminated around the three empty keyholes. Letters appeared in a language neither of them had spoken for years. Yet Jungkook somehow understood every word. Only remembered promises may enter. He stared in disbelief. I can read this. Minyu smiled sadly. You always could. Another memory surfaced. Three children tracing those very symbols with tiny fingers, while Professor Han patiently explained their meaning. These aren't just letters, the professor had once said. They respond to honesty. The memory vanished, but this time it left behind warmth instead of pain. Jungkook no longer feared remembering. He wanted every forgotten piece to return. Another explosion echoed through the underground corridors. The chamber shook violently. Fragments of stone crashed onto the floor. Minyu immediately drew Jungkook away from the center. They're breaking through the outer passages. How long? Minutes. Jungkook clenched his jaw. Then we rescued Jimin now. Minyu nodded. I know where they're taking him. Jungkook looked at him. You do. They've always used the same place. The Glass Sanctuary. The name sounded strangely familiar. It's hidden beneath the old botanical gardens. Jungkook searched his memories. The botanical gardens. He and Jimin had visited them every spring. Jimin had loved the orchids blooming inside the enormous greenhouse. A quiet smile had always appeared on his face whenever sunlight passed through the glass ceiling. He had once whispered, I wish time could stay here forever. Jungkook suddenly froze. That wasn't the first time we went there. Minyu looked at him with quiet encouragement. No. Another memory unfolded naturally. Three children hiding beneath enormous tropical leaves. Playing hide and seek. Professor Han pretending not to find them. Jimin laughing so loudly that butterflies scattered into the sunlight. Jungkook smiled through tears. I remember. It's coming back. Minyu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It will keep returning. The mountain trembled again, this time accompanied by distant voices. Orders shouted through the corridors, metal striking stone. They were dangerously close. Minyu reached into one of the wooden cabinets lining the chamber wall. Inside rested several old leather satchels. He handed one to Jungkook. "Take this." Jungkook opened it. Inside lay an old map, a flashlight, medical supplies, a folded photograph. He unfolded it carefully. It showed 3 smiling children standing beneath the observatory telescope. One held a paper windmill. One carried a wooden bird. The smallest child stood between them, with both arms wrapped tightly around their shoulders. Jungkook stared silently. For the first time, he could recognize every face. His own, Jimin, Minkook. No scratches, no blurred memories. Just 3 inseparable children smiling beneath the stars. A handwritten note covered the back. No matter what they erase, this was real. Jungkook carefully slipped the photograph into his coat beside the silver ring. "I'll never lose this again." Minyu smiled. "You already did once." A gentle silence followed. Then Jungkook laughed softly. "So did you." Minyu laughed as well. The sound echoed warmly through the ancient chamber. For one brief moment, despite everything, they sounded like children again. The moment ended abruptly. A deafening crash exploded beyond the entrance. One of the massive stone doors split apart. Dust flooded the corridor. Shadows moved beyond the smoke. Minyu's expression hardened instantly. "They're here." He grabbed Jungkook's arm. "This way." Together, they sprinted through a narrow passage, hidden behind one of the towering bookshelves. The corridor twisted sharply downward, before opening into an underground railway platform forgotten by history. Ancient train tracks disappeared into darkness. A single railcar waited silently beside the platform. Its polished wooden body looked impossibly well preserved despite its age. Lanterns hanging inside flickered to life the moment they approached. Jungkook stared. "A train." Minyu nodded while unlocking the carriage door. "The fastest route beneath the city. Professor Han built it." "No, it has always been here." The answer raised even more questions, but there was no time to ask. Behind them, distant footsteps multiplied. Voices echoed closer. Minyu climbed aboard. "Hurry!" Jungkook entered just as another explosion shook the tunnel. The heavy door slammed shut automatically. Without anyone touching the controls, the old railcar shuddered. Ancient gears awakened beneath the floor. The carriage began moving. Slowly at first, then faster. The tunnel rushed past outside the windows. Stone walls blurred into darkness. Lantern light danced across the wooden interior. Jungkook looked around. The carriage resembled a library more than a train. Shelves filled with journals lined the walls. Above every window was carved the same sentence: "The truth always remembers its way home." Neither man spoke for several minutes. Only the rhythmic sound of wheels echoed beneath them. Finally, Jungkook broke the silence. "When this is over." Minyu looked at him. "I'm still giving him this ring." He smiled while holding the small velvet box. "Even if everything has changed, even if we never get our lost years back, I still want every tomorrow." Minyu's eyes softened. "He'll say yes." Jungkook smiled faintly. "You're very sure." "I've watched him carry that answer for 12 years. The train emerged briefly onto a bridge inside an enormous underground cavern. Moonlight streamed through cracks high above, illuminating a hidden river flowing beneath the earth. The breathtaking sight lasted only seconds before darkness swallowed them again. Suddenly, the train began slowing. Minyu looked through the front window. "We are here." The carriage stopped beside an iron platform covered in flowering vines. Ahead stood a massive circular door made entirely of crystal glass. Light glowed behind it. Warm, golden, beautiful, yet somehow deeply unsettling. Minyu's face became solemn. "Behind that door," he whispered, "they're keeping Jimin." Jungkook placed one hand over the ring in his pocket. His heartbeat steadied. Every mystery, every forgotten memory, every painful sacrifice had led him here, not to uncover the past, but to bring home the person who had spent 12 years protecting it. Jungkook stood motionless before the towering crystal door, its flawless surface reflecting countless distorted versions of himself. Every reflection seemed slightly different. In one, he appeared as the man he had become. In another, he was only a frightened child. In yet another, he wore a smile he no longer remembered ever having. The silence surrounding the glass sanctuary felt unnatural. No guards, no voices, only a soft melody drifting through the crystal walls. Jungkook listened carefully. His eyes widened. Someone was playing the piano. The melody was simple, gentle, painfully familiar. He closed his eyes. "I know this song." Minyu nodded quietly. "Jimin wrote it." Jungkook looked at him. "No," he whispered. "We wrote it." Another memory surfaced. 3 children sitting around an old upright piano inside the botanical gardens. Jimin pressing random keys. Minyu laughing every time Jungkook played the wrong note. Professor Han pretending to conduct their imaginary orchestra with a flower stem. The melody had belonged to all 3 of them. Jungkook slowly raised his hand toward the crystal door. The moment his fingertips touched its surface, the music stopped. A deep vibration echoed beneath the floor. Thin lines of light spread across the glass, like veins awakening after centuries of sleep. The enormous door silently parted. Warm golden light poured into the corridor. Inside stretched a magnificent greenhouse, unlike anything Jungkook had ever imagined. Towering trees reached toward an invisible ceiling. Rare flowers bloomed in every imaginable color. Crystal streams flowed gently across polished white stone. Thousands of butterflies drifted peacefully through shafts of sunlight filtering from above. For one breathtaking moment, the sanctuary appeared almost like paradise. Until Jungkook noticed the cages. Not made of iron, made entirely of transparent crystal. Each one stood among the flowers. Each one was empty. Except one. At the center of the greenhouse, Jimin sat quietly inside. His wrists were free. No chains restrained him. No locks surrounded him. He simply sat on a white stone bench beneath a blooming cherry tree, gazing upward as pink petals slowly fell around him. He looked unharmed, yet the loneliness in his eyes pierced Jungkook far deeper than any wound. "Jimin!" Jungkook ran toward him. The moment he crossed the halfway point, an invisible force slammed into him. He was thrown backward across the marble floor. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Minyu hurried to help him up. "I forgot." His voice carried frustration. "The barrier." Jungkook pushed himself upright. "What barrier?" Minyu pointed toward the faint shimmer surrounding the crystal cage. It only opens for someone carrying all three keys. Jungkook looked toward Jimin again. This time Jimin had noticed them. For several long seconds, he simply stared. His eyes slowly filled with tears. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not because he was relieved. Because he had expected Jungkook to come. He gently walked toward the transparent wall separating them. Only centimeters remained between their hands. Yet the invisible barrier kept them worlds apart. You shouldn't have come. Jimin's voice was calm. Jungkook shook his head immediately. I was never going to leave you. Jimin laughed softly. You've always been stubborn. And you've always kept secrets. The smile faded from Jimin's face. I know. Silence settled between them. Jungkook slowly removed the silver ring from his pocket. I brought this. Jimin looked at it. His breathing caught. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he whispered. You still carried it. I carried it everywhere. Jungkook stepped closer to the barrier. I was going to ask you tonight. I know. I almost did. I know. The letter stopped me. Jimin lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You don't understand. I understand enough. Jungkook's voice became steadier. You loved me before I remembered loving you. You waited years. You protected me. You gave pieces of yourself so I could survive. His eyes shimmered. And somehow, he smiled gently. You still believed I'd find my way back. Jimin's tears finally escaped. I never stopped believing. Minyu quietly turned away, allowing the two of them a moment that belonged only to them. Jungkook placed his palm against the invisible barrier. I remember our promise now. Jimin slowly mirrored the gesture from the opposite side. Their hands aligned perfectly, separated by only a sheet of unseen energy. No matter how dark the night becomes. Jungkook began. Jimin finished the sentence through trembling tears. I'll find you by the stars. The barrier shimmered brightly. Soft light spread outward from where their hands nearly touched. The greenhouse itself seemed to respond. Flowers opened simultaneously. Butterflies lifted into the air. Even the streams sparkled more brightly. Minyu turned back in astonishment. The sanctuary recognizes the promise. Before anyone could understand what was happening, slow applause echoed across the enormous greenhouse. A lone figure emerged from behind the cherry blossoms. Elegant, well-dressed, silver-haired despite appearing no older than 40. His calm smile never reached his eyes. So, the man spoke almost warmly. They really did remember. Jungkook instinctively stepped in front of the barrier. Who are you? The stranger inclined his head politely. My name. He smiled. Is Adrian. I am the current keeper of the archive. Minyu's expression darkened instantly. You should have stayed buried. Adrian chuckled. History never buries those who write it. He slowly approached the crystal cage. You've made this easier than expected. Jungkook frowned. What do you want? Adrian looked directly at him. You. Silence followed. Adrian continued. Not because of who you are, but because of what you still carry. Jungkook instinctively touched his chest. The memories. Adrian nodded. When your memories were erased 12 years ago. His smile faded. One memory refused to disappear. And that single memory, he looked toward the stone floor beneath the greenhouse, is the only thing capable of opening the true archive. Jungkook's heartbeat slowed. What memory? Adrian's eyes reflected something almost like admiration. The last thing you saw before everything was taken from you. Jungkook searched desperately through the fragments returning to him. Fire, smoke, children running, Professor Han shouting, Jimin holding his hand, Minyu disappearing into darkness. Then, a door, an enormous circular stone door hidden beneath the observatory, slowly opening, and behind it, a blinding light. His pupils widened. The forgotten image crashed back into his mind with overwhelming force. He gasped, I've seen it before. Adrian smiled. Exactly. The keeper spread his arms calmly. You were never important because of who you became. His voice echoed throughout the sanctuary. You were important. His smile widened. Because you are the last living witness. The words echoed through the glass sanctuary long after Adrian had spoken them. You are the last living witness. Jungkook stood perfectly still. A strange pressure settled inside his chest, as though something deep within him had awakened after years of silence. The greenhouse around them seemed to react. The crystal walls shimmered. The streams flowing through the sanctuary slowed almost to a stop. Even the butterflies landed quietly among the flowers, as if nature itself were listening. Jimin watched Jungkook with growing concern. Don't force yourself to remember. His voice was gentle. It nearly destroyed you once. Jungkook didn't answer. He couldn't. The image behind Adrian's words continued expanding inside his mind. Not fragments anymore. A complete memory. 12 years earlier. The observatory had not been silent. Children's laughter echoed beneath its dome. Professor Han knelt beside 3 small figures gathered around the enormous telescope. Jimin proudly held a paper lantern. Minyu clutched the wooden bird. Young Jungkook carried a tiny silver compass. Professor Han smiled. Tonight, he whispered, you'll see something that only a few people have witnessed. The children looked at each other excitedly. Treasure? Minyu asked. Professor Han laughed. No, something far more valuable. He led them beneath the telescope. The stone platform slowly descended, just as it had for Jungkook days earlier. The hidden staircase appeared. The children hurried downward. Wonder filled their eyes as they entered the archive chamber for the very first time. But unlike the chamber Jungkook had recently explored, another door had existed then. A massive circular gate carved from pure white stone. 3 keyholes glowed faintly across its surface. Professor Han inserted the 3 ancient keys. One by one, the gate slowly opened. Brilliant light poured into the chamber. Not blinding, warm, peaceful. The children instinctively stepped closer. Inside floated countless lights. Millions, tiny glowing fragments drifting like stars inside an endless sky. Young Jungkook stared in amazement. What are they? Professor Han smiled. They are memories. The 3 children looked around in awe. Every truth, every promise, every kindness, every goodbye, every life honestly lived. They remain here. Young Jimin reached toward one glowing light. It gently landed upon his fingertips. He smiled. It feels warm. Professor Han nodded. Because memories never truly disappear. They simply wait for someone willing to remember. Then, the memory changed. The warmth vanished. A deafening alarm echoed through the archive. Professor Han's expression transformed instantly. No, he whispered. They found us. Heavy footsteps thundered above. Voices shouted. Explosions shook the observatory. Professor Han immediately closed the great stone gate. The glowing lights disappeared behind it. He knelt before the children. His eyes filled with urgency. Listen carefully. No matter what happens, you must never tell anyone what you saw. The children nodded nervously. But if we forget? Young Jungkook asked. Professor Han gently placed a hand upon his shoulder. Then your hearts will remember. The memory suddenly accelerated. Smoke filled the staircase. Glass shattered overhead. The observatory burned. Professor Han pushed the children toward a hidden passage. Run! They ran, holding hands. Jimin never released Jungkook. Minyu stayed behind them. Then, a loud explosion. The ground collapsed. The children were separated. Jungkook turned back. He saw it. The moment Adrian had spoken about. Professor Han standing before the entrance, facing dozens of black-cloaked figures alone. One man stepped forward. The same silver-haired face. Younger, unchanged. Adrian. Their eyes met. Even across 12 years. Adrian smiled calmly, then raised one hand. Everything dissolved into white light. The memory ended. Jungkook staggered backward. His breathing became ragged. Tears streamed silently down his face. I remember. His voice trembled. I remember everything. Across the barrier, Jimin closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his own cheek. I was hopping. He whispered. You'd never have to. Adrian watched them quietly, almost thoughtfully. You finally understand. Jungkook slowly looked toward him. You erased my memories. No, Adrian answered calmly. I merely allowed others to erase them. You murdered our childhood. I preserved humanity. The answer was so cold that even Minyu flinched. Adrian continued, walking slowly through the sanctuary. Do you know what memories truly are? They aren't emotions. They aren't nostalgia. They are power. They inspire revolutions. They create wars. They destroy empires. They expose monsters. He stopped beneath the blooming cherry tree. If humanity remembered every truth. He smiled faintly. Civilization would collapse. Jungkook shook his head. No, it would finally become honest. Adrian sighed. An idealistic answer. The same one Professor Han gave. The same one Jimin still believes. He looked toward the crystal barrier. And the same answer that has always required sacrifice. Without warning, he snapped his fingers. The greenhouse trembled violently. The crystal cage surrounding Jimin slowly began sinking into the marble floor. Jimin's eyes widened. Minyu rushed forward instinctively. No! Another invisible barrier erupted around the entire sanctuary, separating all three of them. Adrian calmly watched. The second key is descending into the original archive. He smiled politely. If you wish to save him. He looked directly at Jungkook. You must finally open the door you closed 12 years ago. The marble floor beneath Jimin continued descending. Slowly, steadily, petals drifted downward around him. Jimin never looked away from Jungkook. Instead, he smiled, the same quiet smile he had worn the first day they met again after forgetting each other. The same smile that had patiently waited through 12 long years. He carefully reached inside his jacket, removing a tiny velvet box, white, slightly worn from being carried for years. He opened it. Inside rested a white gold ring. Engraved inside its band were the words Jungkook had spoken beneath the childhood stars. I'll find you. Jungkook's vision blurred completely. Jimin laughed softly through his tears. I told you. He whispered. I was going to ask first. Even as the floor carried him deeper into the hidden darkness below, he continued smiling, not because he had given up hope, but because, after 12 years of waiting, Jungkook had finally remembered the promise that neither time nor stolen memories had ever been able to erase. Jungkook stared as the platform carrying Jimin disappeared beneath the marble floor, the white gold ring still glimmering in his trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at him to break through the crystal barrier, to fight with all his strength, to refuse the impossible choice placed before him. Yet the deeper truth Professor Han had tried to protect slowly settled inside him. This battle had never been about defeating one man. It had always been about deciding whether the truth deserved to survive. Adrian stood silently beneath the blooming cherry tree. You remember everything now, he said. So choose. Open the original archive and return every stolen memory to the world, or walk away and allow history to remain exactly as it is. Jungkook closed his eyes. Faces appeared one after another. Professor Han smiling beneath the observatory dome. Minyu laughing while chasing butterflies through the botanical gardens. Jimin patiently rebuilding a love story that only he remembered. None of them had sacrificed everything simply for revenge. They had sacrificed everything so that truth would never completely disappear. Jungkook slowly opened his hand. The black key, the silver ring, the brass compass. Each object represented a promise, not a weapon. He looked toward Minyu. Without speaking, Minyu understood. He removed the bronze key from around his neck and placed it in Jungkook's palm. This belongs to all of us now. Together they descended through the ancient passage beneath the sanctuary until they reached the enormous circular stone gate Jungkook had finally remembered. The first key slid into place. The second key was already waiting, carried downward with Jimin's platform. The third key completed the circle. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the mountain itself seemed to awaken. Ancient gears echoed through the darkness. The stone door slowly opened. Warm light poured into the chamber once more. Millions of glowing memories floated peacefully before them like an endless galaxy. No voices, no commands, only quiet truth. Jungkook stepped forward. One glowing memory drifted gently into his hands. It showed a child comforting another child after a fall. Another memory revealed strangers helping one another during a storm. Another showed parents embracing their newborn child. The archive had never collected power. It had collected humanity. Adrian entered the chamber behind them. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. If those memories are released, he warned, people will remember every kindness they buried, but they will also remember every betrayal, every crime, every wound. Jungkook looked at the countless lights surrounding him. They deserve the choice. Adrian lowered his eyes. You sound exactly like Professor Han. And he was right. Jungkook gently lifted the silver ring. He smiled sadly. Love only means something when it survives the truth. He reached toward the center of the glowing constellation. The silver ring touched the oldest light. The chamber erupted in radiant brilliance. The countless memories rose together like stars returning to the night sky. Far above, throughout cities, villages, mountains, and oceans, people suddenly paused. A forgotten lullaby returned to an elderly woman. A father remembered the promise he had made to his daughter. Old friends recalled why they had once forgiven each other. Brothers separated for years remembered their final embrace before anger divided them. Around the world, forgotten kindness quietly found its way home. The archive did not rewrite history. It simply gave people back what had always belonged to them. When the light finally faded, the crystal barriers throughout the sanctuary dissolved into sparkling dust. The platform carrying Jimin slowly rose again. He stepped onto solid ground, blinking against the fading glow. For a long moment, neither he nor Jungkook moved. Then they simply walked toward each other. No barriers remained. No invisible walls. No forgotten years. Only the quiet distance between two people who had finally found their way back. Jungkook stopped before him. His hands trembled as he opened the small velvet box he had carried since the beginning of that unforgettable night. The silver ring reflected the last rays of golden light. "I planned a perfect proposal," Jungkook said with a soft laugh. "Candles, flowers, music." Jimin smiled through tears. "I know. It didn't happen that way." "No." Jungkook took a slow breath. "But maybe this is better." He knelt, not because the moment demanded perfection, but because his heart did. "Jimin, no matter how many memories disappear, no matter how many years life steals from us, I will always choose to find you again. Will you spend every tomorrow with me?" Tears slipped freely down Jimin's cheeks. He laughed quietly before opening the worn velvet box he had carried for 3 years. Inside rested the white gold ring engraved with the words, "I'll find you." "So," Jimin whispered with a playful smile, "are we proposing to each other?" Jungkook laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. "I think we are." They slipped the rings onto each other's fingers at the same moment. Around them, the glowing lights of the archive drifted upward through the opening mountain, rising into the evening sky until they became indistinguishable from the stars. Minyu watched from a distance, smiling with peaceful eyes. Professor Han's old brass compass, now resting quietly upon the stone floor, finally pointed north for the first time in 12 years, as though its journey had also reached its end. Adrian stood beneath the fading light without resistance. He looked at the restored memories surrounding him and slowly removed the keeper's emblem from his coat, placing it upon the ground before walking away alone. Some burdens ended not with defeat, but with acceptance. Years later, visitors often spoke of an old observatory overlooking Silver Lake. They said the stars there somehow seemed brighter than anywhere else, and lavender bloomed every season around its white stone walls. No one knew why two simple rings had been carved into the entrance beside three small initials, J, J, and M. Only Jungkook, Jimin, and Minyu understood. Some promises are stronger than time. Some memories are brighter than darkness. And the truest kind of love is not the one that never gets lost. It is the one that always finds its way home.